Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sedona International Film Festival, where we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. I'm Carol Kahn, and we are coming to you live from the Media Room at Yavapai College, who is one of our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Northern Arizona Healthcare. Thank you for being our sponsor for the last several years, and we'd like to thank our hoteliers, restaurateurs, volunteers who support the film festival year after year. We're very grateful. And as Patrick Schweiss always says, this is a filmmakers film festival. So I'd like to introduce to you Scott with the film A Shot in the Arm. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Good, and you're no stranger to the film festival.
Third time now. It's an
Third time's a
honor
charm.
to be back. Third time's a charm. Love this town. Love this festival.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back again
course.
and bringing your film.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about your film.
Sure. Shot in the Arm. It's tricky to leave out the A. Shot in the Arm started as a measles documentary in 2019, where we saw record-breaking measles outbreaks, state of emergency in New York City in 2019, a year before COVID, state of emergency in Washington State, measles outbreaks across Europe. And I was looking at that, and I did my very early research and saw that in 2000 we were on the path to eliminate measles because of the success of the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. And so why are we having these outbreaks? And I reached out to Dr. Paul Offit out of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and he said, Scott, it's not terribly complicated. There are people out there that have come to be known as anti-vaxxers that are scaring parents into not taking the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine because they're trying to tie it to autism or other health risks. And that's lowering vaccine rates, and it's never a matter of if, it's really a matter of when we're going to see measles outbreaks. So that was all happening, and I started filming with Dr. Paul Offit, Dr. Tony Fauci before he became Super Fauci, Peter Hotez, and of course the people that have come to be known as the sort of top of the pyramid of the anti-vaxxers, Andrew Wakefield, Del Bigtree, and Robert Kennedy Jr., who's now running for president as an independent. And that we thought we had a pretty fascinating and complicated film in 2019. Then COVID happened, and it got much more complicated. So yes, that's the impetus for Shot in the Arm.
Okay, so we have a trailer, so let's take a look at that. And we'll
Great.
talk some more.
Oh, please.
Awesome.
In 2019, I started working on a documentary about the rising rate of measles.
Why is this happening?
Because people are choosing not to vaccinate their children.
And how some were trying to politicize science.
Anybody who tells you, trust me on the science, you shouldn't trust them.
Our citizens are part of a medical experiment you are putting on them.
It is our children that have been affected.
They believe what they're saying. Unfortunately, it's a false belief, and their anger is directed in the wrong place.
I watched reports that measles is deadly. I think we have to question what we call deadly. If Ebola is sweeping the country, talk to me then.
I had no idea what was coming next. Lockdown day one. From the beginning of COVID, our family struggled to make sense of what was going on.
I did think that the arrival of COVID would be the end of the anti-science world.
Were you right?
I was never so wrong in my life.
The vaccine itself is going to kill far more people.
Conspiracy theorists play into distrust. Don't trust the experts. Don't trust the scientists.
It's going to be a disaster for mankind.
I absolutely see the pandemic as an opportunity.
On January 6th, these are the anti-vaxxers.
You've been sold a lie.
Del is selling a lie, and he's selling it hard, and we're just offering the truth.
Science isn't political, at least it shouldn't be. Vaccines have allowed us to live 30 years longer than we did 100 years ago. That's what vaccines can do.
This is Vax Talk, the podcast for people who prefer not to get polio.
To counter disinformation in a compassionate way, we have to get good information out there.
You were given a broken and beautiful world. You will take this world in your hands and make it less broken and more beautiful.
Once the truth doesn't matter, then it's not a democracy anymore.
I know I saw you sigh through a couple of scenes in that.
It's been a very emotional journey. I mean, none of us have lived through anything like COVID, right? The last time anything close to this was 100 years ago. So yeah, bringing the film to the world has been a great honor, but it's also been very, very emotional. I don't think we know what all of this has meant to us in terms of surviving those of us that were lucky enough to survive a once-in-a-century pandemic. But the bigger part is the damage to the social contract that's underneath that people who made it worse, right, with disinformation and lying and really a fight against decency that's really been very sad to see.
I mean, you know, playing devil's advocate on the other side of that too, like, and not being a conspiracy theorist at all, but what if there was another side of the story? I know you presented this and you're very strongly, this is how you presented the documentary, but what if there was this other complete side? And I say that only because friends of mine who got the vaccination for COVID ended up with either heart issues or, which is common, especially in men, cancer in their kidneys, I mean, I'm not just telling you what they've told me. So, I mean, things that they're pro-vax, but when all these things started happening to them, they really started questioning, should I had even taken the vaccine? So I'm just presenting that because that's something that's been presented to me. That doesn't make a statement from me.
Sure.
It just is what they've said. So it also presents another kind of twist to how do you respond to something like that?
Of course. So I'm so sorry for any of your friends that had any harm. It's very difficult to piece apart the science of this. It's very easy to say, don't trust the COVID vaccine and it's gonna harm you. That's easy for somebody to say. And sadly, on the science side, we have to peel back each piece of that. So first of all, the COVID vaccine has been seen as almost 90% effective in at least keeping you out of a hospital and not causing death. The safety of it is over and over. The safety of it is very, very valid. So we have to say, okay, when did they get the vaccine? Is the vaccine directly related to the harm that they think they may have had? There are wonderful systems in place for them to report those harms, and if they have had harm, there's money in place to try and make that right. But by the percentages, there has been so little harm from the vaccine and incredible benefit to the vaccine. So I'm glad to hear that your friends are still not anti-vax, because vaccines have been probably the greatest medical health benefit to us in the history of mankind. And it's stories like that that people like Robert Kennedy Jr. will try to glom onto and say, see, harm, 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 when it's such a small number of harm and it's not necessarily related to the vaccine. So it's really, really complicated. Two words that we talk about a lot in bringing this film to the world is the difference between being skeptical and being cynical, right? So being skeptical is the vaccine safe? Did this vaccine actually cause that harm? And let's go down the road and look at that. But let's look at it clear-eyed. Let's look at it with the best science that we can. Cynical is when presented with the evidence that says that the vaccine is much more beneficial than it does cause harm, and somebody continues to say, no, it's not, that's cynical. And we're sadly living at a time where there's a lot of cynicism out there. And it takes great patience to try and break that down.
When you started doing this documentary, so you started with the measles part, were you ever skeptical about anything going into it? Or was in your belief system that you believe that vaccinations or whatever it was is key? Like,
sure.
So did that change anything through your research?
Sure. Yeah, my belief system is a belief in critical thinking. My belief system is a belief in science, the best science that we have available to us. So there's not a belief in vaccines, it's a belief in the systems to see if a vaccine works, to see if a vaccine is safe. So that's where I find grounding. There can be mistakes made, and we will look at those clear-eyed. We point them out in the movie with the polio vaccine. There was a terrible mistake. Doesn't mean that the polio vaccine isn't absolutely beneficial. So it's really peeling these things back and taking the time to look at them. So I tried my best to not come with a bias, right? But we all have confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, for your wonderful listeners, is do we look for evidence that supports our beliefs? So is somebody that is very, very excited about the benefits of science in the history of mankind, being a scientific method to try and make decisions that are better for all of us, I absolutely am grateful for the systems of science. That doesn't mean mistakes aren't going to happen. So it's very, very tricky. The important thing is, are we using the best information, the best systems of science to make these decisions and not take the bait of cynicism or clever marketers who are telling us the misinformation and disinformation. So it's complicated, but by and large, we have benefited from science. We're using science right now. My daughter's 7th grade science teacher said to the class one day, tell me something in your life that doesn't involve science, right? We have to reset how we look at these things, because people say, oh, just believing in science is dangerous. It's like, that's actually not even a thing, believing in science. It's using the scientific method individually over and over again.
I know it's interesting because your past films, was it The Food Evolution? Is that?
Food Evolution was a reset of the conversation on GMOs, where there's a lot of overlap, where people have manipulated what actually are GMOs and the benefits of them to say, that's poison, let me sell you a different product. So there's some overlap there, but I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say the message that you carry through with your films are ones to support, again, whether it's your bias, belief system, whatever, right, that you want to make a point about what's happening.
Yeah, it's a point of saying we're living at a time, especially with social media, and I'm not blaming social media. Social media is wonderful. It's how we use it. But we're living at a time where social media is a confirmation bias machine, right? That you can feed people their biases so easily, and it benefits. Social media celebrates cynicism, it celebrates anger, and can loop that. So we have to take a pause and go, oh, am I taking the bait of this confirmation bias? Am I being led astray? And it's much harder. It's much easier to go, everybody that's in my group is saying this, and I believe them, and let's go down that road. But that leads to tribal thinking, and it really leads to dangerous things like believing that the 2020 elections were stolen, and there were anti-vaxxers at January 6th, because it becomes a sort of a, if you believe my lie, I'll believe your lie, and that tribalism can grow from there. But the good news is the people that are anti-vax and spreading disinformation are a small group. There's so many more of us that are using science and using decency and using democracy to try and have and using the social contract, right, to have a functioning society. We're just living in a time that people are making that very fragile. So I like to look at it as a reset of reminding us that we're all benefiting from science. We all benefit when we remember we're in this together. We benefit when we remember the social contract, right? And the social contract is just believing in elements. How do we want to have a functioning society, right? And it's believing in not drinking and driving, picking up your garbage, right? Using science to make the best decisions. And right now, the social contract is in a very fragile place, but we'll get it back.
I know, it just, you have the extremes.
Yeah.
So like you have people who are anti, you have people who are completely believe in that. What about the people in the middle?
Well,
you got that middle group.
That's right. The middle are the people that respect the social contract and respect science to try and make the best decisions that we can. There really isn't an extreme of science and anti-science, because science is a method built into science is a system to be able to check the people that are presenting the science to you, right? People think, oh, antis will try and present it as, oh, those people with science, they just believe in each other lockstep. they've never been to a science conference. That's exactly the opposite of what science is. Science presents a hypothesis, and then the rest of the scientific system will rip that hypothesis apart to make sure that it's true, because they will benefit if they prove that it's wrong. So when we have something like consensus, like we had with the COVID vaccines, that's saying it is safe, it is effective by and large, that is an incredible thing. And it doesn't come easily. It comes through scrutiny and testing and testing. So the good news is that as you use your hands, the extremes would be, being simplistic, extreme left, extreme right, saying don't trust, celebrating cynicism really. Don't trust, don't trust, don't trust. Come to us, we'll tell you the truth. But there's many more people that are believing in the systems that we have to support science and support the social contract, and we have to remember that.
Awesome. And Scott, when is your film being shown?
10 a.m. tomorrow, Saturday morning.
Okay, awesome. And how can people find out more about your film?
Sure, shotinthearmmovie.com. Please follow us on all the socials and request a screening and spread the word.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us and bringing your film.
Of course.
And if you're following us on social media and you're out and about and taking photos, don't forget to hashtag us with hashtag SIFF30 and watch us on Facebook Live throughout the day, where we have all our filmmaker interviews. And we'll be back with more filmmaker interviews shortly.